My mother stood up at Thanksgiving dinner, raised her wine glass, and said, "Everyone, let's be honest. The only reason Emily is still invited to family events is because we feel sorry for her." Everyone at the table laughed. I sat there quietly, staring at the turkey I had spent 6 hours preparing, while my older brother Jason leaned back in his chair with a smug smile. My father didn't stop my mother. Instead, he looked at me and said, "Maybe it's time you accepted that you've never really made anything of yourself." I could have argued. I could have screamed. I could have walked out. Instead, I took one slow sip of water and looked around the dining room. None of them knew that the house we were sitting in wasn't actually my parents' house anymore. None of them knew who had been paying the property taxes, insurance, and mortgage for the last 3 years. And most importantly, none of them knew that before dessert was served, I was going to reveal exactly who legally owned the house. My name is Emily Carter, and if you had asked me 5 years earlier whether I thought my own family would ever humiliate me in front of everyone I loved, I would have said no. I believed families could fight, disagree, and even hurt each other's feelings, but there was always supposed to be a line you didn't cross. I thought Thanksgiving was one of those lines. I was wrong. I grew up in a middle-class family outside Charlotte, North Carolina. My father, Richard, worked in commercial real estate, and my mother, Linda, ran a small interior design business from home. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. My older brother, Jason, was always the favorite. He was outgoing, athletic, and confident. Teachers loved him. Neighbors loved him. My parents talked about him like he was destined for something extraordinary. I was different. I was quieter. I liked books, computers, and working with my hands. I wasn't interested in parties or expensive clothes. I didn't mind spending weekends helping my grandfather repair old furniture or fixing things around the house. My parents called me shy. Jason called me boring. When we were teenagers, the difference between us became even more obvious. Jason got a new car when he turned 16. I got my grandfather's 12-year-old sedan. Jason went to an expensive university. I went to a state college and worked part-time to cover my expenses. My parents said they were proud of both of us, but their actions always told a different story. After college, I got a job in property management. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. I learned how real estate worked from the ground up. I learned about property taxes, zoning laws, mortgages, insurance, contracts, renovations, and commercial development. While Jason was getting promoted at our father's company, I was slowly building a career of my own. Then my grandfather died. His death changed our family in ways I never expected. My grandfather had owned several small properties in North Carolina. Nothing huge. A few rental houses, a small commercial building, and the family home where he had lived for more than 40 years. After his funeral, my father told me that my grandfather had left me something. I assumed it was money. It wasn't. He had left me the family house. I was shocked. The house was old but beautiful. It sat on almost 2 acres of land, and my grandfather had spent decades maintaining it. He had always told me that one day it would be mine, but I never thought he meant it literally. My father wasn't happy about the inheritance. He told me the house was worth more than I understood. My mother said it would be a burden. Jason openly complained that it should have gone to him. I didn't argue. I simply accepted the house. For the next year, I spent weekends repairing it. The roof needed work. The plumbing was outdated. The kitchen needed to be renovated. I replaced the flooring, repaired the porch, painted the entire interior, and restored my grandfather's old study. The house slowly became beautiful again. Then something unexpected happened. A developer approached me. They wanted to purchase the property because of its location. The land was valuable, very valuable. I refused. The house wasn't just an investment to me. It was the last place that still felt like my grandfather. My father thought I was being stupid. He told me I should sell it and invest the money. Jason told me I was wasting an opportunity. I ignored both of them. Then my father started having financial problems. His real estate business had taken on too much debt. Several commercial properties were underperforming, and one major project had stalled. He asked me for a loan. I gave him one. It wasn't a huge amount compared to the value of the property, but it was significant to me. My father promised to repay me within 18 months. He never did. Instead, he started acting like the money had been a gift. Whenever I brought it up, he would say, "We're family, stop keeping score." I eventually stopped asking. That was my mistake. Because when you teach people that you will tolerate disrespect, they eventually start believing they are entitled to it. 3 years later, I was living in the family house. My career had taken off. I had started my own property management company and was doing extremely well. But my family still saw me as the quiet daughter who wasn't as successful as Jason. Jason had married a woman named Megan, and together they had 2 children. My parents adored them. Every family gathering revolved around Jason's family. If Jason bought a new car, everyone celebrated. If he got a promotion, my mother called relatives to tell them. If I signed a new business contract, nobody cared. I tried not to let it bother me. Then Thanksgiving came. My mother called me 2 weeks before the holiday. She said, "We're hosting this year." I asked where. She laughed. "At your grandfather's house, of course." I paused.
Quay ngược lại.
"My
Quay đầu
house."
lại.
She said, "Don't be difficult, Emily. It's the family home." I reminded her that the property belonged to me. She became annoyed. It's still the place where the family has always celebrated Thanksgiving. I didn't want to fight, so I agreed. That was how I ended up spending Thanksgiving morning preparing food in my own kitchen, while my mother acted like she owned the place. She arrived early with Jason, Megan, and their children. My father came shortly after. The house filled with noise. Children running around. Music playing. People talking. For a few hours, everything felt normal. Then dinner began. We all sat around the long dining table my grandfather had built himself. There were 14 people. I had prepared turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, sweet potatoes, homemade rolls, cranberry sauce, and 3 pies. My mother looked around the table. Then she smiled. "I have something to say." I immediately knew that wasn't good. She raised her wine glass. "I want to make a toast to family." Everyone lifted their glasses. Then she looked at me. And to Emily, for finally finding a way to keep herself useful. Jason laughed. I smiled politely. My mother continued. "You know, Emily has always been a little behind the rest of us." My father chuckled. I looked at him. He didn't even seem uncomfortable. Jason said, "That's putting it nicely." Everyone laughed. I put my fork down. My mother continued. "She's never had Jason's ambition." Jason leaned back. "Some people are just comfortable being average." My face felt hot. I looked at my mother. "Can we not do this tonight?" She shrugged. "I'm just being honest." My father said, "Maybe people need to hear the truth sometimes." I looked around the table. My cousins were staring at their plates. My aunt looked uncomfortable. Jason was smiling. Then my mother said something that crossed the line. "You know what I think, Emily. I think you've stayed in this house because you know you couldn't afford a place like this on your own." The table went silent. I stared at her. My mother smiled. Jason laughed. Then he said, "That's actually pretty accurate." I looked at my father. "Is that what you think too?" He shrugged. "Your mother isn't wrong." I took a slow breath. My mother continued. "Honestly, we're all worried about what will happen when you can't maintain this place anymore." I looked around the room. Then I asked, "Why would I have trouble maintaining it?" Jason answered, "Because you're not as successful as you think you are." I smiled. That was when I realized something. They genuinely believed I was struggling. They had no idea what I'd been doing behind the scenes. My mother raised her glass again. To family. I lifted mine. To family. Then I set it down. And I said, since we're being honest tonight, maybe we should talk about the house. My father immediately looked at me. Emily, don't start. I smiled. No, I think it's time we finish something you started years ago. Jason frowned. What are you talking about? I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out a folder. My mother stared at it. What is that? I placed it on the table. Property records. My father froze. Jason looked confused. I opened the folder. Then I said, you all keep talking about this house like it's yours. My mother said, because it is the family home. I looked directly at her. No, it's mine. My father rolled his eyes. We've been through this. I nodded. Yes, we have. Then I placed the first document on the table. The deed. My grandfather had transferred the property to me legally. My name was the only name on it. Jason looked at the paper. Then he looked at my father. My father said, we know you inherited the house. I nodded. That's not the part you don't know. I pulled out another document. My father leaned forward. What is that? I said, the mortgage payoff statement. My mother frowned. What mortgage? I looked at her. The mortgage you thought you were paying. Jason's face changed. I continued. Remember when Dad's business started having problems 3 years ago? My father stared at me. I told them that I had discovered the company was struggling more than they had admitted. The loan my father had taken from me wasn't just personal. It had been used to keep one of his properties from foreclosure. He had never repaid me. Instead, I had quietly restructured the debt through my company. Then I had purchased the outstanding loan. My father looked confused. I explained that the loan secured against one of his commercial properties had eventually become part of a distressed debt portfolio that my company acquired. He stared at me. You bought the loan? Yes. Jason suddenly sat forward. What does that mean? I looked at him. It means Dad has been paying me for the last 3 years without knowing it. My father looked like he couldn't breathe. My mother whispered, no. I nodded. Yes. Then I placed one final document on the table. It showed the current ownership structure of the family business property. My father stared at it. His face went completely pale. I said, and that's not even the biggest surprise. Jason asked, what is? I looked at him. Do you remember the developer who wanted to buy this land? Jason nodded slowly. I said, they weren't just interested in the land. I explained that I had spent the previous 2 years quietly acquiring several surrounding properties through my company. The reason? The area was about to undergo a major redevelopment. My grandfather's house sat at the center of it. The land that my family had mocked me for keeping was now worth several times what it had been worth when my grandfather died. Jason stared at me. My mother asked, how much is it worth? I didn't answer immediately. Then I said the number. The room went silent. My father's face changed. Jason looked stunned. My mother put her hand over her mouth. The same house they had just spent Thanksgiving mocking me for owning was now the most valuable property any of us had ever controlled. Jason suddenly laughed nervously. So you're rich now? I looked at him. No. He frowned. I've been financially successful for years. He stared at me. Then why didn't you tell us? I smiled. Because I wanted to know whether you respected me when you thought I had nothing. Nobody spoke. My mother began crying. I looked at her. Mom, you spent years telling me that I wasn't successful enough. Dad told me I was behind Jason. Jason told me I was average. I pointed at the food on the table. And tonight, you all humiliated me in my own house. My father said, Emily, that's not what we meant. I shook my head. No, that's exactly what you meant. My mother said she was sorry. I asked her why. She said, because we didn't know. I stared at her. That isn't an apology. She looked confused. I continued. You're sorry because you found out I'm not poor. My father lowered his head. Jason said, come on, Emily, we're family. I looked at him. That word didn't matter to you 5 minutes ago. He didn't respond. Then I did something they never expected. I stood up. I walked into my grandfather's study. I opened the old desk. And I pulled out a second folder. Inside were documents I had never shown anyone in my family. My grandfather's original estate plan. My father had always claimed that my grandfather had intended the property to remain in the family. But that wasn't true. My grandfather had written a letter to me. I had kept it private for years. I brought it to the table. My father recognized the handwriting immediately. What is that? I said, a letter from Grandpa. My father looked terrified. I read the first part aloud. My grandfather had written that he wanted me to have the house because I was the only person in the family who seemed to understand that a home wasn't about money. He wrote that he trusted me to protect it. My mother started crying. Jason looked away. Then I read the last line. It said, if they ever make you feel like you don't belong, remember that you don't need their permission to build a life of your own. I stopped reading. The room was silent. My grandfather had known. He had known exactly what my family was like. And suddenly, I understood why he had chosen me. My father stood up. He looked at me and said, you think you're better than us now? I shook my head. No. Then why are you doing this? I answered honestly. Because you humiliated me. He said, we were joking. I looked around the table. Then why wasn't anyone laughing 5 minutes ago? Nobody answered. My mother stood up and came toward me. She hugged me. I didn't hug her back. She whispered, please forgive us. I stepped away. I can forgive you. She looked relieved. But that doesn't mean I have to keep letting you hurt me. Her face fell. I told everyone that Thanksgiving dinner was over. My father asked me to reconsider. Jason said I was being dramatic. I opened the front door. And I said, you have 10 minutes to leave. They left. One by one. My mother was crying. My father looked angry. Jason wouldn't look at me. When the door finally closed, I walked back into the dining room. The food was still there. The candles were still burning. My grandfather's table was covered with dishes. And suddenly, I felt exhausted. Not victorious. Not angry. Just tired. Because the truth was, I never wanted to humiliate my family. I wanted them to love me. That had been the real reason I worked so hard for so many years. I wanted my father to look at me the way he looked at Jason. I wanted my mother to brag about me. I wanted my brother to respect me. But that night, I finally understood that I couldn't force people to value me. The only thing I could control was whether I continued allowing their opinions to define me. The following Monday, I made a decision. I sold several of the surrounding properties to the developer. But I kept my grandfather's house. I renovated it completely. I restored his study. I repaired the porch. I kept the dining table. And I turned the house into something my grandfather would have loved. A place where people could gather without needing to prove how much money they had. I also changed my relationship with my family. I didn't cut them off completely, but I created boundaries. My father no longer had access to my finances. My mother no longer made decisions about my home. Jason stopped receiving financial help from me. And for the first time, if he wanted something, he had to earn it himself. Months later, my mother came to visit. She stood on the porch and looked at the renovated house. Then she said, "It's beautiful." I nodded. She asked, "Do you still hate us?" I looked at her. "No." She looked relieved. "But I don't trust you the way I used to." Her smile disappeared. I continued. "Trust doesn't come back because someone says sorry. It comes back because someone changes." She nodded. Then she asked me something unexpected. "Are you happy?" I looked around the house. At my grandfather's old garden. At the restored porch. At the windows he had installed decades earlier. And I smiled. "Yes." She nodded. "Then I suppose that's what matters." I didn't tell her that her words meant more to me than she probably realized. Because for years, I had measured my success by whether my family approved of me. Now I measured it differently. Was I happy? Was I proud of what I built? Did I respect the person I had become? The answer to all three was yes. A year later, my father came to me with a business proposal. He wanted to sell one of his remaining properties. I listened. Then I told him I'd consider buying it. He looked surprised. "You do business with me." I smiled. "Business is business." He laughed. It was the first genuine laugh we'd shared in years. I bought the property. Not because I needed it. Not because I wanted revenge. But because it was a good investment. And that was the biggest change of all. I no longer needed to punish my family. I no longer needed to prove that I was better than them. I had already proven something far more important. I could build a successful life without their approval. My family humiliated me at Thanksgiving because they believed I was the least successful person at the table. They mocked my career. They mocked my choices. They mocked the house my grandfather had left me. They thought I was holding onto an old property because I couldn't afford anything better. They didn't know that I had spent years quietly building a business. They didn't know that I had acquired the debt behind my father's property. They didn't know that the land they were sitting on was worth millions. And they certainly didn't know who really owned the house. But when I finally revealed the truth, the look on their faces wasn't the most satisfying part. The most satisfying part was realizing I didn't need them to be impressed anymore. I had spent my entire life trying to prove I belonged at their table. That Thanksgiving, I finally realized something. I had never needed a seat at their table. I owned the house. I owned the land. I owned the business I had built. But more importantly, I owned my own life. And no amount of family humiliation could ever take that away from me.